The veterinarian's hand froze above the consent form, her pen suspended in mid-air as she stared at the gaunt German shepherd collapsed in the corner. "Mr. Hayes, I need you to understand, this dog is already gone." It wasn't death she was offering. It was mercy. "Doctor," Morrison's assistant gasped, backing against the wall as Duke, all 85 pounds of dying military dog, suddenly lifted his massive head. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead, casting harsh shadows across protruding ribs and patches of missing fur where war had left its marks. I remembered Helen's final breath, how her fingers had clutched mine with surprising strength. "Promise me," she'd whispered, "you won't let anything else die alone in that house." Now, 2 years later, I stood in this sterile room watching another soul surrender to grief. "Not today," I heard myself say, my Vietnam-weathered hands steady despite everything. "Not this soldier." Duke's amber eyes flickered, the first sign of life in weeks. What had this war dog seen? And why did he look at me like he'd been waiting? The Phoenix heat hit me like a physical wall as I stepped out of the clinic, Duke's leash heavy in my hand. Even at 9 in the morning, the temperature was already climbing past 90 degrees, the asphalt parking lot shimmering with waves of heat. The Santan Mountains rose in the distance, their red rocks glowing like embers against the cloudless sky. This desert had been my home for 40 years. But it had never felt so empty as it did these past 2. Duke moved like a ghost beside me, his once powerful frame reduced to sharp angles and visible ribs. Each step seemed to cost him something precious, as if he was spending the last of his reserves just to stay upright. The tattoo inside his left ear, MWDKIA 0319, told part of his story. Military working dog, killed in action, March 2019. Except he wasn't killed. His handler was. My truck sat baking in the sun, a 2008 Ford F-150 that Helen had insisted we buy new. "We've earned something reliable," she'd said, running her hand along the dashboard like it was fine silk. Now her lavender air freshener still hung from the rearview mirror. Its scent long faded, but the purple fabric somehow still holding its shape. I opened the door and waited. Duke stood perfectly still, his training overriding whatever pain he carried. "Load up," I said softly, using the military command I'd learned from Marcus Washington at the shelter. The big Marine had pulled me aside after I'd signed the papers, his dark face creased with worry. "This dog's been through hell, Robert. Found him at Luke Air Force Base, just sitting by the flagpole in 110-degree heat. Wouldn't move for 3 days. Base security tried everything, food, water, other dogs, nothing. He was waiting for someone who's never coming back." Duke climbed into the truck with painful dignity, curling into the furthest corner of the bench seat. In the rearview mirror, I caught sight of myself, 64 years old, silver stubble I'd forgotten to shave, eyes that Sarah said looked hollow these days. My daughter worried about me living alone in that big Spanish colonial, 2,800 square feet of emptiness punctuated by Helen's reading chair, her crossword puzzle still folded in the magazine rack, her coffee mug sitting clean in the cupboard because I couldn't bear to use it. The drive home took us through familiar streets lined with Palo Verde trees and front yards full of decomposed granite and drought-resistant plants. Neighbors were already retreating indoors, surrendering to air conditioning. Tom Martinez waved from his driveway, then did a double-take when he saw I had a passenger. The retired Phoenix cop had been trying to get me to join his poker games, go to Knights of Columbus meetings, anything to get me out of the house. "You're disappearing, Roberts," he'd said last week. Helen wouldn't want this. But Helen was gone, and what she wanted had been buried with her in Holy Cross Cemetery, beneath a headstone that read, "Beloved wife, mother, and friend, What remained was just me, this dog, and a promise I wasn't sure either of us could keep. The donation was supposed to be simple. Just drop off Max's old bed, his leashes, the unopened bag of senior dog food I couldn't bring myself to throw away after my golden retriever's heart gave out 6 months ago. I'd loaded everything into the truck bed that morning, telling myself it was time. Helen would have donated it all immediately. She was practical that way. "Someone else needs it more," she would have said, already boxing things up with her efficient nurse's hands. The Haven County Animal Shelter sat on the outskirts of Phoenix, a low concrete building that tried to look cheerful with its desert-toned paint and cheerful paw-print murals. The moment I walked through the door, the smell hit me. Disinfectant mixed with dog fur and that particular scent of anxiety animals give off in strange places. A young volunteer with a bright smile and ASU Sun Devils t-shirt greeted me at the desk. "Just dropping off donations," I said, setting the box on the counter. That's when Marcus Washington emerged from the back office. 6'4", built like he still ran 5 miles every morning, the former Marine moved with the kind of purposeful grace that never really leaves military men. His eyes caught on my faded 1st Cavalry Division pin on my baseball cap, the one I'd worn so long the black horse had almost worn away. "Air Cav," he said, not a question, but recognition. "When?" 69 to 71, Ladrang Valley. His face shifted, that look veterans give each other when they realize they're talking to someone who understands certain things without explanation. Marine Corps, Operation Desert Storm, different war, same shit. He picked up the donation box, peered inside. "Golden Retriever?" "Max, good dog." "They all are." Marcus set the box aside. "You just dropping off, or you want to look around? Got some good dogs needing homes." I should have said no. Should have walked out right then. But something in his tone, carefully neutral like he wasn't pushing, made me nod. Just a look. The main kennel area was chaos, barking, jumping, tails wagging desperately against chain link. A beagle mix howled operatically while a pit bull puppy tried to climb the fence. Normal shelter dogs doing normal shelter things, each one hoping this visitor might be their ticket out. Marcus led me past them without stopping, through a heavy door marked "Staff Only." The back area was different, quieter. These were the dogs that had given up selling themselves. "We call this the Last Chance Ward," Marcus said, his voice dropping. "Dogs that have been here too long, ones with issues, they get one more week back here before—" He didn't finish. Didn't need to. The kennels held maybe a dozen dogs, an ancient lab with cloudy eyes, a 3-legged boxer, and in the very last kennel, as far from the door as possible, a shadow that used to be a dog. "Jesus," I breathed. Duke lay in the corner like a discarded coat, his black and tan fur dull and patchy. Even from 10 feet away I could count his ribs. But it was his eyes that stopped me, amber-colored, staring at nothing with the kind of 1,000-yard gaze I'd seen in too many mirrors after coming home from Vietnam. "That's Duke," Marcus said quietly. "Military working dog, 3 tours in Afghanistan. His handler was KIA 5 months ago. Convoy hit an IED outside Kandahar. Duke stayed with the body for 18 hours until they could extract. Had to sedate him to get him away from his handler." The kennel card told the rest. No appetite, no interaction, aggressive when cornered. The small print at the bottom had tomorrow's date circled in red. "Found him at Luke Air Force Base 3 weeks ago," Marcus continued. "Just sitting by the flagpole in brutal heat. Base commander called us when he wouldn't move for 3 days. Thought maybe a civilian shelter would help, but—" He gestured at the motionless form. "He's shutting down. Seen it before with military dogs. They're trained for one handler. And when that bond breaks—" I found myself kneeling by the kennel door. Duke didn't react, didn't even blink. In Vietnam, I'd had a scout dog named Ranger for 6 months. When he stepped on a mine meant for me, I held him while he died, his blood soaking into red dirt. 48 years later, I still dreamed about his eyes. "Can I go in?" Marcus hesitated. "He's unpredictable. Last week he went after a volunteer who moved too fast." "I'll be careful." The kennel door opened with a metallic scratch. I moved slowly, the way you approach wounded animals or broken men. Duke still didn't acknowledge me. I sat on the concrete floor, my back against the wall about 5 feet from him. Close enough to share space, far enough not to threaten. We sat in silence. Minutes passed. The shelter sounds faded to background noise. Finally, I spoke, keeping my voice low and steady. "At ease, soldier." Duke's ear twitched. Just barely, but it was the first voluntary movement Marcus had seen from him in days. The shelter director's intake of breath was audible. I didn't move, didn't push. Just sat there, sharing space with another survivor who'd lost his purpose. The concrete was cold through my jeans. Somewhere in the main kennel, a dog barked hopefully. The fluorescent lights hummed their institutional song. "He hasn't responded to anyone," Marcus whispered. "Not even our veteran volunteers." But I wasn't trying to make him respond. I was just recognizing what I saw, that particular kind of broken that comes from losing the one thing that gave your life meaning. Helen had been gone 2 years, and I still set 2 coffee cups out every morning. Still saved her crossword puzzles from the Sunday paper. Still couldn't sleep on her side of the bed. "What happens tomorrow?" I asked, though I already knew. State law, we can only hold aggressive dogs for so long. And he's suffering, not eating, barely drinking. The vet says his organs are starting to shut down. Sometimes the kindest thing— Duke shifted slightly, just enough to show he was listening. His tags clinked softly, military tags, not civilian. One would have his ID number, the other would have his handler's information carried so the dog could be returned if separated in field. Together even now. "I'll take him." The words came out without thought, surprising me as much as Marcus. But once said, they felt inevitable. Like Helen's voice in my head, "Robert James Hayes, you cannot let that soldier die alone." "Robert, I appreciate what you're trying to do, but this isn't Max. This is a 90-pound military dog with severe trauma. If something happens, then it happens." I stood slowly, my knees protesting. "But not tomorrow." "Not like this." Marcus studied me for a long moment, former Marine to former air cav, reading what wasn't said. Finally he nodded. "I'll get the paperwork." The first night was hell. I'd set up Duke's bed, Max's old bed, in the garage, thinking familiar smells of motor oil and lawn equipment might be less threatening than the house. Duke hadn't moved from his crate since we'd arrived, still curled in that same defensive position he'd held at the shelter. I'd left the crate door open, placed water and food nearby, and retreated to the doorway to watch. By midnight, neither of us had moved. My back screamed from sitting on the concrete floor, but every time I shifted, Duke's eyes would flicker with something between awareness and alarm. So I stayed still, remembering nights in Vietnam when movement meant death, when you learned to ignore your body's complaints because the alternative was worse. At 3:14 a.m. exactly, Duke began to howl. It wasn't like any sound I'd heard from a dog before. This was grief given voice, a keening that started low in his chest and built to something that made my teeth ache. The garage walls seemed to amplify it, turning his pain into something physical that pressed against my chest. I understood then why the shelter had him in the back kennel. This wasn't a sound that inspired adoption. The howling lasted exactly 12 minutes. Then silence, more complete than before. Duke's eyes stayed open, staring at something I couldn't see, or someone. My phone buzzed. Tom Martinez. Everything okay over there? Sounds like... I texted back, new dog, sorry. 3 dots appeared, disappeared, appeared again. Finally, need help? No, thanks. But I did need help. I just didn't know how to ask for it anymore. Helen had been the one who kept us connected to the world. Dinner parties, church socials, neighborhood barbecues. Without her, I'd become a ghost, haunting my own life. Dawn came slowly, desert pink creeping across the garage floor. Duke hadn't closed his eyes once. Neither had I. When I finally stood, my joints popping like firecrackers, he tracked my movement but nothing more. I'll be back, I told him. Just getting coffee. In the kitchen, I went through the automatic motions, filling the pot, measuring grounds, hitting the button, 2 mugs from the cabinet, then catching myself and putting one back. The house felt wrong with another living thing in it, like Helen's absence had become a presence I'd learned to live with, and now Duke's grief was disturbing that delicate balance. By day 3, Dr. Patricia Morrison was standing in my garage, shaking her head. He's lost 8 pounds since the shelter. At this rate, his organs will start shutting down within the week. Duke lay exactly where he'd been 72 hours ago, though I'd seen him drink water twice when he thought I wasn't looking. The food remained untouched. His coat was dull, his breathing shallow. Even his grief seemed to be exhausting itself. There are medications we can try, Doctor. Morrison continued, her voice gentle but firm. Appetite stimulants, anti-anxiety drugs, but honestly, Robert, sometimes dogs just give up, especially military dogs. The bond with their handler is everything. When that's severed. What killed his handler? I asked. She consulted her tablet. IED attack outside Kandahar. Sergeant Michael Thompson, age 28. Duke was in the vehicle, survived without major physical injuries. But the psychological trauma, she gestured at the motionless dog, he hasn't been the same since. That night, I brought my sleeping bag to the garage. If Duke was going to die, he wouldn't die alone. I'd made that promise to Helen, and somehow it had become about more than just me. Day 7 brought Sarah. Dad, what the hell? My daughter stood in the garage doorway, still in her hospital scrubs from a 12-hour shift. Her blonde hair, so like her mother's, was pulled back in a messy bun. Dark circles under her eyes made her look older than 38. Mrs. Chen called me, said you're sleeping in the garage with some aggressive dog. He's not aggressive, he's grieving. Dad! She rubbed her face, a gesture so familiar it made my chest tight. You can't save every broken thing. Sometimes you have to let go. Like you let go of your marriage? It was cruel, and I regretted it immediately. Sarah's face closed off, that professional nurse's mask sliding into place. That's different. Is it? We stood there, father and daughter, with 20 years of careful distance between us. She'd been 18 when I came back from my second tour in Iraq, old enough to see how the war had changed me, but not old enough to understand why. By the time I'd found my way back to being her father, she was already gone. College, marriage, divorce, single motherhood. Now we circled each other like polite strangers, Helen's death having removed our only common ground. Where's Emma? I asked, trying to soften things. With her dad. It's his weekend. She looked at Duke, who hadn't acknowledged her presence. Is that blood on his paws? I looked closer. She was right. Duke's pads were raw from what looked like obsessive licking. Another sign of stress, grief manifesting in self-harm. I'd seen soldiers do worse. I'll handle it, I said. With what money, Dad? I saw the bills on your kitchen counter. You're 3 months behind on the mortgage. That's not your concern. You're my father. Of course it's my concern. She pulled out her phone. I can transfer? No. The word came out harsher than intended. I don't need your money, Sarah. Then what do you need? Time, I thought. Understanding. For someone to look at me and see more than a stubborn old man refusing to admit defeat. But I just shook my head. After she left, I sat back down near Duke. He'd watched our entire argument without moving, but something in his eyes had shifted. Recognition, maybe, of another creature familiar with conflict. She means well, I told him. Gets that from her mother. The worry, not the sharp tongue. That's all me. Day 10 brought a breakthrough so small I almost missed it. I'd been reading aloud, an old habit from Helen's last months when the pain medication made focusing difficult. Tom Clancy, because that's what was on the garage shelf. Duke's ear twitched when I said the word Kandahar. I set the book down. You were there, weren't you? Kandahar. This time, both ears moved. I was in Helmand Province, 03. Different war than my first one. Desert instead of jungle. IEDs instead of punji stakes. But the waiting was the same. The not knowing when everything would go to hell. Duke's breathing changed just slightly, deeper, more aware. Your handler, Thompson. He was young, 28, the vet said. I was 28 once. Thought I was invincible, probably thought he was too, right up until... A sound escaped Duke. Not quite a whine, not quite a sigh. Just acknowledgement that someone was saying the name he'd been waiting to hear. That's when I understood. He wasn't just grieving. He was waiting. The way Helen had waited for me to come home from deployment, even after the notification officers had shown up. Missing, presumed dead, meant nothing to her. She'd waited 14 months until they found our crashed helicopter and what was left of my crew. She'd waited because that's what love does. It waits even when waiting makes no sense. He's not coming back, I said softly. I'm sorry, Duke, but Sergeant Thompson is not coming back. Duke closed his eyes for the first time in 10 days. That night, he ate 3 bites of boiled chicken from my hand. Dr. Morrison called it a miracle. I called it a beginning. But Sarah's words echoed in my head. You can't save every broken thing. Maybe not. But maybe 2 broken things could save each other. Helen would have understood that. She'd understood it when she married a man still screaming himself awake from jungle nightmares. She'd understood it through 2 more wars, through the drinking years, through the slow journey back to something resembling whole. I looked at Duke, who was watching me with those amber eyes that held too much pain for any creature to carry alone. We're going to try, I told him. That's all. Just try. For the first time, his tail moved, not a wag, barely a twitch, but movement, life, hope. It was enough to build on. The breakthrough came on day 31, though it started with what looked like defeat. Dr. Morrison stood in my kitchen, her medical bag on the counter between us like evidence in a trial. Duke lay on his bed in the corner. He'd finally moved inside the house a week ago, though he still wouldn't go past the kitchen. His kidney values are concerning, she said, showing me the blood work results on her tablet. He's down to 67 pounds. That's a 30% body weight loss. His organs are starting to fail, Robert. I stared at the numbers without really seeing them. Behind Dr. Morrison, Duke watched us with those amber eyes that never seemed to fully close anymore. He'd eaten maybe 10 meals in a month, each one coaxed with hours of patience and mostly left unfinished. What are you saying? She pulled out a form from her bag, placed it gently on the counter. Sometimes the kindest thing we can do is let them go peacefully. He's suffering. The euthanasia consent form sat there like an accusation. I'd signed one for Max, held him while he went to sleep for the last time, told myself it was mercy. But Max had been 16 with failing kidneys and a heart murmur. Duke was 5 years old with a broken spirit, and that felt different. That felt like giving up. The kitchen door burst open before I could respond. Sarah stood there, still in her scrubs, face flushed with anger. Mrs. Chen called me again, said she saw the vet's truck. Her eyes landed on the form. Are you kidding me? You're going to put him down after everything? Sarah? No, Dad. You've spent a month sleeping on the floor with this dog, spent God knows how much on vet bills we can't afford, and now you're just giving up? She grabbed the form, crumpled it. Mom's been dead 2 years and you're killing yourself over a dog that won't even look at you. That's enough. My voice came out harder than intended, that command tone from a lifetime ago. Is it? Because from where I'm standing, you care more about this broken animal than your own family. When's the last time you saw Emma? When's the last time you answered my calls without me having to drive over here? Duke shifted, his first voluntary movement all morning. Just a slight adjustment of position, but we all noticed. You want to know why I don't answer? I found myself standing, matching her volume. Because every conversation is about what I'm doing wrong, how I'm grieving wrong, living wrong, dying wrong, according to Saint Sarah, who has everything figured out. I'm trying to help. I don't want your help. The silence that followed was deafening. Dr. Morrison cleared her throat. I'll leave the form. Call me when you decide. She left quietly, professionally, probably used to family drama in her line of work. Sarah stared at me, and for a moment I saw her at 16, crying after her first heartbreak, wanting her father to fix something he didn't understand. Now she was 38, divorced, raising Emma alone, and I still didn't know how to fix anything for her. Mom would be ashamed, she whispered, and left. I sank into a chair, my hands shaking slightly. Duke watched it all, and I swear something shifted in his expression. Recognition, maybe. He'd probably seen plenty of arguments in his military career. Stress did things to people, made them say things they couldn't take back. That's when Emma appeared in the doorway Sarah had left open. Grandpa? My granddaughter stood there in her school uniform, backpack still on, holding something in her hands. 8 years old, with her mother's blonde hair and someone else's green eyes, Sarah never did tell me who Emma's father was, just that he was gone before Emma was born. Hey, sweetheart, your mom just left. I know. We passed in the driveway. She was crying. Emma's matter-of-fact tone reminded me of Helen, who never sugar-coated difficult truths. Are you really going to kill Duke? It's complicated, Em. She walked past me to where Duke lay, moving with the fearless confidence of a child who hadn't learned to be afraid yet. I started to warn her back, but Duke just watched her approach. She sat down cross-legged about 3 feet from him and opened what she'd been carrying, an old photo album. I found this in your closet, she said. Mom said I could look while she talked to you. I recognized it immediately. My Vietnam album, the one Helen had made me create during therapy. That's private, Emma. But she was already flipping through pages, and Duke was looking. His head lifted slightly, nostrils flaring as if he could smell the history in those old photographs. Who's this? Emma pointed to a picture of me at 22, skinny and sunburned, standing next to a German shepherd in front of a helicopter. That's Ranger. He was my scout dog in Vietnam. He looks like Duke. She turned the page. Did he die? Yeah, he died. Were you sad? Very sad. She nodded solemnly, then looked at Duke. My teacher says dogs remember everything through smell. Maybe Duke can smell Ranger on these pictures. Maybe he knows you understand. It was child's logic, impossible and perfect. But Duke had lifted his head fully now, those amber eyes focused on the album with the first real interest he'd shown in anything. Can I show him? Emma asked. I should have said no. Should have protected both of them from whatever might happen. But I was tired of protecting everyone from everything, tired of keeping all the broken pieces separate so they couldn't cut each other. Be careful. Emma scooted closer to Duke, the album between them like a bridge. She turned pages slowly, narrating in her serious 8-year-old voice. This is Grandpa when he was young. This is his dog Ranger. This is a helicopter. Mom says Grandpa used to fix them so they could fly and save people. Duke's breathing changed, deeper, more engaged. When Emma reached a photo of Ranger alerting to something off camera, Duke made a sound. Not quite a whine, more like recognition. He knows, Emma said simply. He knows you had a dog like him who died. That's why he's so sad. His person died too. The truth of it, simplified to its essence by a child who didn't know she was supposed to complicate things, hit me like a physical blow. Duke and I weren't just grieving. We were mirrors, reflecting loss back at each other until that's all either of us could see. Emma, honey, why don't you? Can I read to him? Mom says reading helps when you're sad. Before I could answer, she'd pulled a book from her backpack. Charlotte's Web, of course. The book about friendship and loss and the cycle of life that every third grader read. Emma settled herself against the wall and began reading in her clear, careful voice. Duke listened. More than listened. Engaged. His eyes tracked from Emma to me to the book, as if triangulating safety. After 10 minutes, he did something that stopped my heart. He army crawled forward 6 inches. Not much. Not even close to Emma. But toward her. Toward the sound of a young voice reading about a pig and a spider and the kind of friendship that transcends death. I found myself sinking to the floor, sitting with my back against the cabinet. Emma kept reading, and Duke kept watching, and for the first time in a month, the kitchen didn't feel like a hospice. When Sarah returned an hour later, she found us like that, Emma reading, me listening, Duke lying between us like he was standing watch. She stopped in the doorway, her anger from earlier replaced by something softer. Mom, Emma said without looking up, Duke likes Charlotte's Web. He's listening. Sarah looked at me, and I saw Helen in her expression, that mix of exasperation and love that had carried me through 3 wars and 40 years of marriage. I'm sorry, she mouthed. I nodded. Apologies could wait. Right now, Emma was reading about how Charlotte saved Wilbur with words, and Duke was 6 inches closer to rejoining the living. And that was enough. That night, after Sarah and Emma left, I sat with Duke and the photo album. I showed him each picture, told him the stories, how Ranger had saved my squad 3 times. How he'd died stepping on a mine meant for me. How I'd held him while he bled out, promising I'd remember him. Different war, I told Duke. Different place, but the same loss, the same guilt about surviving when they didn't. Duke made that sound again, that almost whine of recognition. Your handler, Sergeant Thompson, he was young, 28. I've got shirts older than that. I found myself really looking at Duke for the first time. Past the grief and weight loss, I could see what he'd been, powerful, alert, dedicated. You tried to save him, didn't you? That's what you were trained for, to detect the threat, alert your handler, keep him safe. But sometimes you can't save them. Sometimes you do everything right and they die anyway. Sometimes you spend the rest of your life wondering what you could have done differently, even when the answer is nothing. The vet thinks you're giving up, I continued. Sarah thinks I'm killing myself trying to save you. But maybe we're both just trying to figure out how to keep living when the person who made it worthwhile is gone. Duke's tail moved, just once, just barely. But it moved. That's when I understood what needed to happen. Duke wasn't just a grieving dog, and I wasn't just a lonely old man. We were veterans, both of us, trained for missions and partnerships that had ended badly. But the training was still there, under the grief, the structure, the purpose, the need to serve. It was all still there. "Starting tomorrow," I said, "we're going back to basics. Reveille at 0600, PT at 0630, Chow at 0700. You were a soldier, and by God, we're going to remember what that means." Duke lifted his head fully, and for the first time since I'd brought him home, his ears pricked forward, alert, ready. The next morning I woke at 05:45, put on my old Army PT shirt, and entered the kitchen to find Duke already sitting by his bed, watching the door. Waiting. "Fall in," I said softly. He stood, shaky, thin, but standing. At attention. We went through the basic commands, the ones every military dog knows. Sit. Stay. Down. Heel. His body remembered even when his spirit had forgotten. Each successful command earned a small piece of boiled chicken, and this time he ate without coaxing. Tom Martinez saw us in the backyard and nearly dropped his coffee mug. "Is that the same dog?" "Same dog," I called back. "Just remembered he's a soldier." It wasn't a miracle cure. Duke still had more bad days than good. He still woke up howling at 3:14 a.m., still spent hours staring at nothing. But now there was structure to hang healing on. Morning PT became our routine. First just standing exercises, then short walks to the end of the driveway, then around the block. Each day a little further, a little stronger. Sarah brought Emma by twice a week for reading sessions. Charlotte's Web gave way to Where the Red Fern Grows, then Old Yeller. Emma never asked why all her dog books ended sadly. Maybe she understood that Duke needed to hear stories where loss was acknowledged, not avoided. 6 weeks into our new routine, Duke did something that made me call Dr. Morrison immediately. "He played," I said, still not quite believing it, "for 30 seconds, but he actually chased a ball. Weight? 78 pounds, up 11 from his lowest." "Robert, that's remarkable. What changed?" I looked at Duke, who was lying in a patch of sunlight, actually relaxed. We stopped trying to fix each other and started trying to understand each other instead. But even as Duke improved, I felt something shifting in my chest. Little things at first, shortness of breath on our walks, a flutter that made me pause. I'd had a heart murmur for years, nothing serious according to my VA doctor. But grief and stress have ways of finding your weak spots, and mine was literally broken-hearted. I didn't tell Sarah, didn't tell anyone. Just added baby aspirin to my daily routine and kept walking with Duke, each step a small victory against the gravity of loss. One evening, as monsoon clouds built over the mountains, Duke brought me his leash for the first time, carried it in his mouth, set it at my feet, then looked at the door. "You sure?" I asked. He answered by walking to the door and sitting, tail swishing slightly against the tile. We walked into the gathering storm, two old soldiers who'd found their way back to something like purpose. The first drops of rain started as we reached the park, and Duke lifted his face to the sky like he was remembering what it felt like to feel things again. That's when I saw him. A young man at the bus stop, military haircut, that 1,000-yard stare I knew so well. He was watching Duke with an expression I couldn't quite read, recognition, pain, hope. Duke saw him too, and for the first time since I'd known him, his tail went straight up, his body rigid with alertness, not aggression, recognition. The young man stood slowly like he was approaching a ghost, or maybe like he was one. "Duke?" he said. "Duke, is that you, boy?" And Duke, professional, disciplined, heartbroken Duke, broke formation for the first time and ran. Duke hit the young man with 90 pounds of desperate recognition, nearly knocking him off his feet. The soldier, because everything about him screamed military despite the civilian clothes, dropped to his knees and wrapped his arms around Duke's neck, his face buried in the fur as the dog whined and licked and pressed against him like he was trying to merge their bodies into one. "Duke, buddy, it's me. It's Mike. I'm here. I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry." I stood frozen on the sidewalk, leash slack in my hand, watching my dog transform into someone else's. Duke was crying. I didn't know dogs could cry like that, but there was no other word for the sounds coming from him. Pure emotional release. Months of grief pouring out in whimpers and yips and a keening that made my chest tight. The rain started in earnest, those heavy drops that preceded a full monsoon downpour, but neither Duke nor the young man seemed to notice. That's when I saw the scars, a web of pink tissue running up the left side of his neck, disappearing into his hairline, burn scars, IED scars. "Sergeant Thompson?" I said, though it came out more like a question than I'd intended. He looked up at me then, and I saw why Duke had been dying. This wasn't just a handler. This was a partnership so profound that both halves had been slowly fading without the other. Thompson's eyes were Duke's eyes, that same amber color, that same depth of loss. "You've been taking care of him," Thompson said, his voice rough. "The chip alert said he was here, but I couldn't believe." He pressed his face back into Duke's neck. "They told me he was dead. They told me he died in the attack." "They told him you were dead," I said. "KIA, March 2019. Thompson's head snapped up. "What? No, I was medevaced to Landstuhl. Traumatic brain injury, burns, busted eardrums. Spent 4 months in a coma, another 6 learning to walk again. They said Duke didn't make it. Said he was too injured. Had to be." He couldn't finish. The rain was coming harder now, and we were all getting soaked. "Come on," I said. "Let's get out of this." Thompson stood, but Duke wouldn't let go. The dog had his jaws gently but firmly clamped on Thompson's wrist, like he was afraid if he let go, his handler would disappear again. They walked like that, Duke leading Thompson while throwing constant looks back to make sure he was still there. My house was only 3 blocks, but by the time we arrived, we were drenched. I grabbed towels while Thompson and Duke stood in the entryway, still touching, still reassuring each other of their mutual existence. When I handed Thompson a towel, I saw his hands were shaking. "I've been looking for him for 2 years, he said. "Soon as I was functional, I started calling. Fort Huachuca said he'd been euthanized due to injuries. I asked for records for proof, but everything was classified or lost or—" He stopped, swallowed hard. "I even went to his kennel in Afghanistan. Just stood there like an idiot, hoping they were wrong." Duke had moved from gripping Thompson's wrist to leaning against his leg, 90 pounds of dog trying to occupy the same space as his person. Every few seconds, he'd look up at Thompson's face, then press closer, a cycle of reassurance that was beautiful and heartbreaking to watch. "Coffee?" I offered. "Something stronger?" "Coffee. Please, I can't drink anymore. Not since—" He gestured vaguely at his head. In the kitchen, I watched Thompson automatically fall into a routine with Duke. Hand signals I hadn't known, micro-communications built from thousands of hours working together. Duke responded like a flower turning toward the sun, every movement sure and eager where before had been only resignation. "How did you find him?" I asked, setting a mug in front of Thompson. I never stopped looking. Kept filing inquiries, FOIA requests, anything. 3 days ago, I got an anonymous email, just an address, and "Your dog is alive." I thought it was a cruel joke, but— He looked at Duke, who had positioned himself between Thompson's feet. "I've been watching the house since yesterday, trying to work up the courage. Saw you walking him just now, and And Duke recognized you. We were together 6 years. Since he was 8 weeks old, I raised him, trained him, deployed with him 3 times. He saved my life 17 times, 17 documented saves, IEDs, ambushes. One time he dragged me to cover when I got hit by sniper fire. Thompson's hand found Duke's head, fingers automatically finding the spot behind his ears. He was more than a partner. He was family, I finished. Yeah, family. The kitchen fell quiet except for the rain hammering on the roof. Duke's eyes were closed, his breathing deep and even for the first time since I'd brought him home. All that grief, all that waiting, and his person had come back from the dead. He almost died, I said quietly. Stopped eating, stopped responding. The vet wanted to put him down a month ago. Thompson's hand stilled on Duke's head. But you didn't let them. No. I recognized what he was doing. I did the same thing after my wife died. Sometimes grief looks like giving up, but it's really just waiting for a reason to keep going. Thompson studied me then, taking in the PT shirt, the Virginia photo on the wall, the careful way I moved that spoke of old injuries and new ones. Air Cav? Among other things. 3 tours between Vietnam and Iraq. Then you understand. I did. The bonds forged in combat, the specific weight of keeping each other alive, the devastation when those bonds were severed. Duke hadn't just lost a handler. He'd lost his purpose, his partner, his reason for being. What now? I asked, though I already knew the answer. Duke was going home. The miracle had happened, and I was about to lose the only thing that had made the house feel less empty since Helen died. Thompson must have seen something in my face because he said, I don't even have a place for him. I've been living in my truck, picking up construction work where I can. The TBI makes it hard to hold steady employment, and the VA... He shrugged. You know how that goes? I did know. The labyrinth of bureaucracy, the months-long waits, the denials and appeals and endless documentation required to prove that your war-broken pieces deserved attention. Where's your truck? Walmart parking lot off Thunderbird. Go get it. Bring it here. He looked uncertain. I can't ask. You're not asking. I'm offering. The guest house out back has been empty for 2 years. It's yours if you want it. I can't pay rent. Don't want rent. Want someone to help me figure out how to keep Duke healthy. He's going to need both of us for a while. Thompson's eyes went bright. You'd do that? Son, I spent 3 months sleeping on a garage floor to keep your dog alive. Letting you use the guest house is nothing. Duke chose that moment to perform his first full play bow since I'd known him, tail up, front end down, eyes bright with unmistakable joy. He barked once, sharp and clear, not the mournful howl of grief, but the confident sound of a working dog ready for action. Thompson laughed, and it transformed his face. Under the scars and the premature lines, he was young. 28, the paperwork had said, but he looked both older and younger, aged by trauma but suddenly boyish in his joy. Yeah, buddy, he said to Duke. We're home. But as Thompson left to get his truck, I felt that flutter in my chest again, stronger this time. I gripped the counter, waiting for it to pass, and found Duke watching me with those intelligent amber eyes. He padded over, pressed his nose into my hand, then did something he'd never done before. He put his paws on my chest and leaned his full weight against me, holding me up. I'm okay, I told him. But he didn't move. Just stood there, supporting me, until the flutter passed. When Thompson returned an hour later with a battered Ford Ranger containing everything he owned, Duke performed a dance of joy that would have been impossible to imagine a month ago. But he also kept checking on me, splitting his attention between his returned handler and the man who'd kept him alive. He knows something's wrong, Thompson said, watching Duke's behavior. He did the same thing in Afghanistan before the IED. Kept trying to alert, but our lieutenant—" He shook his head. "Different kind of alert now." "Has he done this before?" "No." Thompson studied me with those amber eyes so like Duke's. "You should get checked out." "I'm fine." That's what I said for 6 months while my brain was bleeding. Then I had a seizure in a Walmart and woke up relearning how to talk. He paused. "Duke doesn't alert without reason." That night, I showed Thompson the guest house, a small casita Helen had used as an art studio, complete with kitchenette and bathroom. We'd updated it 5 years ago, thinking Emma might want to stay over more often, but that had never materialized. "It's perfect," Thompson said, Duke glued to his side. "I can't. This is too much." "It's not enough," I said, "but it's a start." As I headed back to the main house, Duke broke away from Thompson and followed me. At the door he stopped, looked back at Thompson, then at me, clearly torn. "Go on," I told him. "He needs you." But Duke sat down right there in the doorway, refusing to choose. Thompson and I looked at each other over Duke's head, understanding passing between us. The dog had 2 handlers now, 2 broken soldiers he was determined to save. "See you at Euro 600, Thompson called. "PT, right?" "Roger that." I went inside, but not to bed. Instead, I sat at the kitchen table and finally looked at the papers I'd been ignoring. Insurance statements, medical bills, the second mortgage I'd taken out for Helen's treatment, the numbers that didn't add up no matter how many times I ran them. My chest fluttered again, longer this time. Duke's alert hadn't been wrong. Something was failing, had been failing for a while. I'd just been too focused on saving Duke to notice I might be the one who needed saving. But not tonight. Tonight, Duke was reunited with his handler. Tonight, the guest house had a purpose again. Tonight, 2 broken soldiers had found each other through a dog who refused to let either of them give up. I took one of Helen's heart pills, the ones I'd kept but never admitted to needing, and went to bed. Through the window I could see lights on in the guest house, hear the low murmur of Thompson's voice and Duke's occasional response. For the first time in months, Duke wouldn't wake up howling at 3:14 a.m. His person was alive. The waiting was over, but mine, I suspected, was just beginning. The truth about Emma came out the way most family secrets do, accidentally, devastatingly, in the middle of an argument about something else entirely. It was 3 days after Mike Thompson had moved into the guest house, and the change in Duke was nothing short of miraculous. The dog who'd been dying of grief now radiated purpose, splitting his time between Mike and me with the precision of a Swiss watch. Morning PT with both of us, breakfast with Mike, midday patrol with me, evening training with Mike. He'd gained 5 pounds in 3 days just from the joy of having his handler back. Sarah had come by unannounced, Emma in tow, and found us in the backyard. Mike putting Duke through detection drills while I timed them. She stood at the gate, her face a storm of emotions I couldn't read. "Mom, look!" Emma ran toward Duke, who broke position to greet her with tail wags. "He's all better." "Emma, stop!" Sarah's voice cracked like a whip. "Get back here." "Now." The child froze, confused by her mother's tone. Duke sensed the tension immediately, moving to position himself between Emma and whatever threat he perceived. Mike stood slowly, his movements careful and non-threatening, but his eyes were alert. "Sarah," I started, but she cut me off. "Who is he?" She wasn't looking at me. She was staring at Mike with an expression of pure terror. "Mike Thompson, Duke's handler, the one they said was killed in action." Her face went white. No, he's dead. They said he was dead." Mike took a step forward. "Ma'am, I think there's been some confusion." "Don't!" Sarah grabbed Emma's hand, pulling her back. "Don't come near us." "Sarah, what the hell is going on?" But I saw it then, in the way Emma tilted her head, in the set of her jaw when she was confused, those green eyes that never quite matched Sarah's blue or her ex-husband's brown. The shape of her nose, the way her hair caught the light. Mike saw it too. He went very still, the kind of stillness that comes before everything changes. "Fort Huachuca," he said quietly. 9 years ago. You were the nurse at the TBI clinic." Sarah made a sound like she'd been punched. Emma looked between the adults, picking up on the undercurrents with a child's unerring instinct for adult distress. "Mom? Why are you scared?" "We're leaving." Sarah turned, but I moved faster than I had in years, blocking the gate. "Not until someone explains what's happening." "Move, Dad." "No." Duke whined, stress radiating from him as his pack fractured before his eyes. He moved to Emma, pressing against her leg in comfort. She buried her hand in his fur, anchoring herself. "Sarah." Mike's voice was steady, but I could see the tremor in his hands. "Is she?" "You were dead," Sarah exploded. "They told me you were dead. KIA, they said. Nobody recovered. I was 3 months pregnant, and they told me you were dead." The pieces clicked into place with an almost audible snap. Emma's mysterious father, who was gone before she was born. Sarah's panic when Mike appeared. The way she'd been making secret phone calls since Duke arrived. "You knew," I said, the words heavy as stones. "When I brought Duke home, you knew there was a chance. He was supposed to be dead." Tears were streaming down Sarah's face now. "Do you know what it's like? To grieve someone, to move on, to build a life, and then, I have a daughter?" Mike's voice broke on the last word. He sank onto the bench, legs giving out. She's mine?" Emma, with the devastating clarity of childhood, connected the dots. "Are you my dad?" The silence that followed was deafening. Duke moved between all of us, whining, trying to herd his fractured pack back together. "Mom?" Emma's voice was small. "Is he my dad?" Sarah crumbled. All the strength, all the walls she'd built just collapsed. "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry, baby. I thought he was gone. I thought—" "You told me my dad was a hero who died fighting bad guys." Emma looked at Mike. "Are you a hero?" Mike laughed, but it sounded like crying. "No, sweetheart. Just a soldier who got lucky. You're Duke's person. Duke only likes good people." She said it with the certainty of a child who'd made up her mind. "So you must be good." I watched my granddaughter walk over to the man who was apparently her father, Duke, beside her like a furry guardian. She studied Mike's face with those serious green eyes. His eyes, I realized now. How had I not seen it before? "You have scars," she said, pointing to his neck. "Did they hurt?" "Yes." "Mom says scars mean you survived something that tried to kill you. Your mom's smart. She's also scared." Emma looked back at Sarah, who stood frozen by the gate. "She gets scared when people might leave. Like my other dad did." My heart broke for all of them. Sarah, who'd grieved a ghost. Mike, who'd lost 6 years of his daughter's life. Emma, who'd grown up with a hero myth instead of a father. And Duke, who'd brought them all together only to watch them tear apart. "I need to go," Sarah managed. I can't do this. Not here. Not now." "Sarah," I started. "No, Dad. You don't understand. The notification officers, the folded flag, the grief. I built my whole life on him being dead. I can't." She fled, leaving Emma standing between Mike and me, Duke pressed against her side. "Should I go with Mom?" Emma asked. "Do you want to?" I kept my voice gentle. She shook her head. She needs to cry by herself first. She always does. She looked at Mike. Do you want to be my dad? Mike's scarred hands clenched and unclenched, more than anything in the world. Okay, but you can't leave. Mom thinks everyone leaves. If you're going to be my dad, you have to stay. I'm not going anywhere. Promise? I promise. Emma nodded, satisfied. Can I throw the ball for Duke? The normalcy of the question in the middle of emotional devastation was perfectly Emma. Mike found a tennis ball and we watched her play with Duke while the world rearranged itself around us. I didn't know, Mike said quietly. It was just 2 weeks. She was kind to me when I was terrified about deploying. I wanted to contact her after, but then the IED and the coma, and by the time I could think straight, I figured she'd moved on. I never imagined. She was devastated when the notification came. Married Harrison Coleman on the rebound, had Emma, divorced when she realized she was trying to replace you with someone safe. I watched my granddaughter laugh as Duke performed his detection alerts for tennis balls. Emma's been the only good thing to come from all that pain. She's perfect. She's also stubborn, too smart for her own good, and has her mother's temper. I paused. And apparently, her father's eyes. That night, after Mike had returned to the guest house and Emma had been collected by a calmer but still shaken Sarah, I sat with Duke on the porch. He was restless, moving between the door and the gate, checking on all members of his pack. Complicated, isn't it? I said. He whined in response. You bring Mike back from the dead and suddenly everyone's life explodes. My chest fluttered again, longer this time. I gripped the porch rail, waiting for it to pass. Duke was immediately there, pawing at my leg, that alert behavior Mike had recognized. I know, I told him, but not yet. Let them sort this out first. But Duke wouldn't let it go. He barked, sharp and insistent, then ran to the guest house. Moments later, he was dragging Mike back by the sleeve. What's wrong with him? Mike asked, then saw my face. Sir? Robert? The flutter became a squeeze. The squeeze became pain radiating down my left arm. I had enough time to think, Helen's going to be furious I waited this long before my knees buckled. Duke caught me. 90 pounds of military working dog became a brace, keeping me from hitting the ground hard. Mike was there instantly, lowering me carefully, already pulling out his phone. This is not a drill, he said into the phone. 64-year-old male, cardiac event in progress, 1847 East Maple Drive, history of heart murmur, patient conscious but in distress, professional, calm. Everything I'd expect from a soldier. Duke lay across my legs, grounding me, those amber eyes never leaving my face. Sarah, I managed. Don't call Sarah. With respect, sir, shut up and breathe. The sirens came fast. The EMTs came faster. As they loaded me onto the gurney, Duke tried to follow, held back only by Mike's grip on his collar. Take care of him, I said. Which one of us are you talking to? Mike asked. I managed to smile. Both. Take care of each other. The ambulance doors closed on Duke's howl, not grief this time, but worry. The sound followed me into the darkness, a reminder that I'd given him something to live for. Now I just had to stay alive long enough to see how it all played out. The first thing I heard was arguing, not the polite, hushed disagreements of hospital visitors trying to be respectful, but full-volume, Hayes family arguing. Sarah's voice cut through the fog of medication like a blade. You had a heart attack and didn't tell me you were having symptoms. What were you thinking? Mild cardiac event, I corrected, opening my eyes to find my hospital room crowded with people who weren't supposed to be there. Sarah stood at the foot of my bed, still in her scrubs from her shift. Mike sat in the corner chair with Duke's head on his knee. How they'd smuggled a 90-pound German shepherd past hospital security, I'd never know. Emma was curled in the window seat, drawing in her sketchbook. Mild? Sarah held up what looked like my chart. 40% blockage in your LAD. You're lucky Duke alerted when he did. How did you— I work here, Dad. Did you think I wouldn't find out? She set the chart down, and I saw her hands trembling. Doctor, Patel says you've been symptomatic for months. The medication in your kitchen cabinet expired 2 years ago. Those were Helen's. No, Dad, they were yours. Prescribed 3 years ago when you first presented with arrhythmia. Her voice broke. You've been hiding this since before Mom died. The room fell silent except for the steady beep of monitors and Duke's rhythmic breathing. Even Emma had stopped drawing, though she kept her eyes on her paper. I didn't want to worry anyone, I said finally. Bullshit. Sarah rarely swore, especially in front of Emma. You didn't want to seem weak, you didn't want to need help. You'd rather die alone than admit you're human. Sarah, Mike started, but she rounded on him. Don't. You don't get to play mediator. You've been here 4 days. She took a breath, visibly trying to control herself. Though apparently those 4 days were enough for Duke to save his life, so maybe I should be grateful you're not actually dead. Mom, Emma said quietly. You're being mean. I'm being honest. No. Emma set down her pencil. You're being scared. When you get scared, you get mean. Just like when Grandma was sick. The truth of it hung in the air. Sarah deflated, sinking into the chair beside my bed. I can't lose you too, Dad. Not when we're finally— She gestured vaguely at the room, at the strange configuration of our fractured family. You're not losing anyone, I said. Stent placement tomorrow, home in 2 days. Simple. Nothing about this family is simple, she muttered. Duke chose that moment to break position, padding over to Sarah and resting his massive head on her lap. She froze, then slowly lowered her hand to his fur. Duke's tail wagged once, accepting her into the pack he was determinedly holding together. He's been alerting to your cardiac episodes for weeks, Mike said quietly. I went through your trash. 17 doses of nitroglycerin in the past month. He knew, and he was trying to tell us. I looked at Duke, who gazed back with those knowing amber eyes. Should have listened to you, soldier. He's not the only one you should have listened to, Father O'Brien said from the doorway, because apparently my room was Grand Central Station. The elderly priest entered carrying what looked suspiciously like Helen's journal. Sarah called me, said you might need last rites. I'm not dying, James. Not today. He settled into the remaining chair like he belonged there. But Helen asked me to give you this if you ever ended up here. Said you'd be too stubborn to go peacefully, without instructions. Sarah made a sound between a laugh and a sob. She knew? Your mother knew everything, Father O'Brien said simply, including the fact that Mr. Thompson here would eventually find his way to Duke. He pulled out the journal, Helen's neat handwriting visible on the cover. She was quite specific in her instructions. That's impossible, Mike said. I was declared dead. There's no way she could have known. She volunteered at the VA, Father O'Brien interrupted, specifically with TBI patients. Started about 6 months before she passed. Said she was looking for someone, though she never said who. The room went silent again. I stared at the journal, afraid to touch it. Helen had been planning something even while cancer ate away at her, playing chess while the rest of us were playing checkers. Read it later, Father O'Brien said, setting it on my bedside table. When you're alone. But know this. She loved you enough to plan for your survival, even from beyond. A knock on the door interrupted whatever response I might have made. Dr. Patel entered, looking disapproving at the crowd in my room. ICU rules clearly state 2 visitors at a time, she said, then noticed Duke. And absolutely no animals. How did— He's a service dog, Mike said smoothly, producing papers from his pocket. Medical alert. He detected Mr. Hayes's cardiac event. Dr. Patel looked skeptical but apparently decided this battle wasn't worth fighting. Fine, but I need to examine my patient. Everyone filed out except Sarah, who claimed medical privilege. Duke tried to stay, whining when Mike tugged his collar, but finally followed with clear reluctance. Your troponin levels are stabilizing, Dr. Patel said, checking my chart. The angiogram shows significant but manageable blockage. We can place the stent tomorrow morning, assuming no complications tonight. What about long-term prognosis? She gave me the look doctors reserve for difficult patients. That depends entirely on whether you follow medical advice this time. The notes indicate you've been non-compliant with medication for years. I've been stubborn, yes, your daughter mentioned. She made notes on her tablet. Mr. Hayes, you have a strong heart that's been under tremendous stress. Grief, untreated arrhythmia, financial pressure, your body's been sending signals you've been ignoring. That ends now. After she left, Sarah and I sat in silence. The sun was setting, painting Phoenix in shades of orange and pink through the hospital window. Somewhere in the hallway I could hear Duke's tags jingling, standing guard no doubt. I'm sorry, Sarah said finally, for not seeing it, for being so caught up in my own mess that I missed this. You had your own grief to deal with. No, Dad, I used my grief as an excuse to avoid yours. She took my hand, careful of the IV. After Mom died, it was easier to stay busy, to focus on Emma, on work, on anything but the fact that you were disappearing right in front of me. I'm still here. Barely. If Duke hadn't— She stopped, composed herself. Mike told me Duke's been sleeping outside your bedroom door when he's not with him. Standing guard. He knew something was wrong before any of us. Dogs know things. So did Mom, apparently. She glanced at the journal. Are you going to read it? When I'm ready. What if she knew about Emma? About Mike being alive? I thought about Helen, the way she'd orchestrated our lives without us knowing. The volunteer work at the VA she'd never mentioned. Her insistence that I promise not to die alone. Her final words about saving something. Then, she was giving us all a second chance, I said. Even from the grave. Sarah squeezed my hand. I don't know if I can do this. Mike, Emma, all of it. I built my life on him being dead. How do I just reorganize everything? One day at a time, same way Duke and I did. Duke was dying of grief. You were dying of a broken heart. Not exactly role models for healthy coping. No, but we learned, we adapted, we found reasons to keep going. I looked at my daughter, really looked at her. The exhaustion around her eyes, the way she held herself like she was bracing for impact. Emma needs her father. Mike needs his daughter. And maybe you need to stop carrying everything alone. I don't know how. Start by letting Duke teach you. He's good at bringing broken people together. As if summoned, Duke appeared in the doorway, having apparently given Mike the slip. He padded in like he owned the place, did a quick assessment of my vitals with his nose, then positioned himself between Sarah's chair and my bed. Guard duty. He's not supposed to be here, Sarah said, but her hand was already in his fur. Neither is Mike. Neither is this whole situation. But here we are. Duke's tail thumped once against the floor, satisfied that his pack was together and relatively safe. Tomorrow would bring surgery and uncertainty and difficult conversations. But tonight, in this overcrowded hospital room that smelled of disinfectant and dog fur, we were together. I should let you rest, Sarah said, but didn't move. Stay, just for a bit." So she did. We sat in silence, hands linked, Duke standing watch, while the Arizona sun painted the sky in impossible colors. Somewhere down the hall, Mike was probably pacing, Emma drawing, Father O'Brien praying. All of us held together by a dog who'd refused to let grief win, and a woman who'd planned for miracles even as she was dying. Helen's journal sat on the bedside table, patient as she'd always been. Tomorrow I'd be brave enough to read it. Tomorrow I'd have a tube threaded through my arteries to fix what grief had broken. Tomorrow we'd all have to figure out how to be a family. But tonight, we just existed in the space between heartbeats, grateful for monitors that beeped steadily, and a dog who'd known what we needed before we did. The heart attack had been Duke's final alert, his way of saying enough was enough. Time to stop dying slowly and start living fully. Message received, soldier, message received. Helen's journal sat on my kitchen table for 3 days before I found the courage to open it. I'd been home from the hospital for a week, the stent placement successful, my heart beating steadily, if not enthusiastically. Mike had moved my bedroom to the downstairs guest room to avoid stairs, and Duke had appointed himself my personal medical alert system, rarely leaving my side except for his shifts with Mike. It was early morning when I finally cracked the spine. Duke lay at my feet, the sunrise painting the kitchen in soft gold, coffee cooling in Helen's favorite mug, the one I'd finally let myself use. My dearest Robert, if you're reading this, then Father O'Brien kept his promise, and you finally ended up where I always feared you would, in a hospital bed, probably arguing with doctors and insisting you're fine. Stop it. You're not fine. You haven't been fine since the day I told you about the cancer, and we both know it. I had to stop, my hands shaking. Her voice was so clear in the words I could almost hear her speaking. I'm writing this 6 months before what the doctors say will be the end. 6 months to plan, to prepare, to ensure you don't follow me too quickly into whatever comes next. Because you will try, Robert James Hayes. You'll try to grief yourself to death rather than face a world without me in it. I know you. But here's what you don't know. I've been busy. The next pages detailed her activities with shocking precision. Volunteer work at the VA hospital's TBI ward, specifically seeking out soldiers from Fort Huachuca, looking for someone named Thompson. It took me 4 months to find him. Michael Andrew Thompson, age 26, traumatic brain injury from an IED blast in Kandahar. He'd been asking about his military working dog, Duke, through the fog of medication and confusion. The staff thought he was delirious. I knew better. You see, my love, I recognized the name. Sarah had whispered it in her sleep during those early months of pregnancy, crying for a soldier she thought was dead. I kept her secret then, but secrets have a way of surfacing, don't they? Duke's head lifted, alert to my distress. I steadied my breathing and continued reading. Michael Thompson was very much alive, though badly broken. Burns, TBI, partial hearing loss, but alive, and desperate to find his dog. The Army had told him Duke was euthanized due to injuries. They lied, of course. Bureaucracy often mistakes efficiency for compassion. I spent 2 months helping him remember, helping him heal enough to search. I couldn't tell him about Emma. That wasn't my truth to share. But I could give him hope about Duke. I could plant seeds. By the time you read this, those seeds will have grown. Duke will find his way to you first, a broken soldier needing another broken soldier. Then Michael will follow, because the bond between handler and dog is stronger than any lie the Army can tell. And when he does, Robert, you must let him in, not just into the guest house, but into our family. I set the journal down, overwhelmed. Helen had orchestrated all of this, every piece, every moment planned from her deathbed. You knew, I said to the empty kitchen. You knew everything. Duke whined softly, and I realized I was crying. Helen's next entry was dated a week later, her handwriting slightly shakier. The cancer is moving faster now. The pain medication makes it hard to think clearly, but I must finish this. Robert, you're going to resist what comes next. You're going to see Michael as an intruder, Emma's paternity as a betrayal, Sarah's lies as unforgivable. You're going to want to protect our daughter from the pain of reorganizing her life. Don't. Our daughter has been drowning since the day she was told Michael died. She's been sleepwalking through life, going through the motions of marriage and divorce and single motherhood, but never truly living. She needs to face this. They all do. And you, my stubborn, wonderful fool, need to let them. Your heart is failing not from age or genetics, but from carrying everyone's pain alone. You've been Atlas since the day you came home from Vietnam, holding up the world and wondering why your shoulders hurt. Put the world down, Robert. Let others help carry it. Duke pawed at my leg, and I realized my breathing had gone shallow. I forced myself to inhale deeply, feeling the strange sensation of blood flowing freely through recently cleared arteries. The doorbell rang before I could read more. Duke barked once, then relaxed, his signal for friend, not threat. I found Tom Martinez at the door, holding a casserole dish and wearing his concerned neighbor face. Maria sent food, he said, pushing past me into the kitchen. Says you're too skinny and hospital food doesn't count as nutrition. I'm fine, Tom. Sure you are. That's why Duke called me. I looked at Duke, who wagged his tail innocently. He doesn't have a phone. Might as well have. Mike sent him over to my yard 3 times yesterday when you wouldn't eat. Tom set the casserole in the fridge, then noticed the journal. That Helen's? Yeah. He sat down across from me, uninvited but not unwelcome. We'd been neighbors for 15 years, but the walls between us had only started coming down since Duke arrived. Maria left me letters, he said quietly, when the cancer took her 5 years ago. Took me 2 years to read them all. He studied his hands. Hardest thing was realizing how much she'd been protecting me from, how much she'd carried alone so I wouldn't have to. Helen planned all of this, I said. Duke, Mike, everything. She knew Mike was alive when everyone thought he was dead. Tom whistled low. That's some next-level maneuvering. She was trying to save us all from beyond the grave. Maybe she succeeded. He gestured toward the window where we could see Mike and Duke running drills in the backyard. That young man's been rebuilding your back fence all week. Says it's rent, but I think he just needs to be useful. He's Emma's father. Tom nodded like this wasn't shocking news. Figured as much. Kid's got his eyes. He paused. Sarah, no, you know. We haven't talked about it directly. She's been avoiding anything deeper than medical updates. Give her time. That girl's been holding herself together with spite and coffee for years. Something's got to give. After Tom left, I returned to the journal. The final entries were harder to read, Helen's handwriting deteriorating as the cancer claimed more of her. Robert, my final gift to you is this. Duke will teach you to live again, not just survive, but live. He'll force you to maintain routines, to go outside, to interact with the world. He'll bring Michael, who'll bring purpose. Emma will have her father. Sarah will have to stop running from her past. And you, my love, will have a reason to keep that stubborn heart beating. I know you think I'm leaving you alone. I'm not. I'm leaving you with a mission. Keep this family together. All of it. The broken pieces and the sharp edges and the complicated truths. Duke will show you how. Dogs understand pack dynamics better than humans ever will. Take your heart medication. Let people help. Trust Duke's alerts. And remember, loving again isn't betraying my memory. It's honoring it. All my love, always, Helen. P.S. The guest house renovation was never for Emma. It was for Michael. I knew he'd need a home when he found his way to Duke. Tell him the rent is taking care of you both. I closed the journal, feeling hollowed out and filled up simultaneously. Duke rose, stretched, and padded to the back door. Through the window, I could see Sarah's car pulling up. Emma jumped out, running straight for Mike and Duke. Sarah followed more slowly, the set of her shoulders telegraphed her anxiety. "Showtime," I told Duke, who wagged his tail in agreement. I made it to the backyard in time to see Emma demonstrating her latest drawing to Mike, Duke in a Superman cape. Mike's face, as he looked at his daughter, was a mirror of every father who'd ever been given a second chance. Sarah stood apart, arms crossed, watching. I moved beside her, letting silence settle between us. "I read Mom's journal," I said finally. "And she knew about Mike, about everything. She planned this." Sarah's laugh was bitter. "Of course she did. Even dying, she was still fixing everyone else's problems. Is that what this is? A problem to be fixed?" She gestured at Mike and Emma, at Duke circling them protectively. "I don't know what this is, Dad." "My dead boyfriend is alive. My daughter has a father she's been mourning her whole life. Your dog apparently orchestrates family reunions. Nothing makes sense anymore." "When has family ever made sense?" "It used to, when Mom was here." "No," I said gently. "It just seemed to because she was managing all the complicated parts where we couldn't see them." Duke chose that moment to bark, drawing our attention. Emma had climbed onto Mike's shoulders, both of them laughing as Duke performed his detection alerts for invisible threats. The late afternoon sun caught Emma's hair, turning it the same shade as Helen's in our wedding photos. "He's good with her," Sarah admitted quietly. "He's her father. That trumps everything else." "Does it? He's been gone 9 years, Dad. Dead for all intents and purposes. We built a life without him. You built a life around his absence," I corrected. "There's a difference." Sarah turned to look at me fully. "When did you become wise?" "Sometime between the heart attack and reading your mother's posthumous instructions." I took her hand. "Sarah, you don't have to figure this all out today, or tomorrow, or next week. Just let it unfold." "I don't know how to do that." "Sure you do. You do it every day in the ICU. Triage the critical stuff, stabilize what you can, let the body heal itself." She squeezed my hand. "Bodies are easier than hearts. Tell that to my cardiologist." That earned me a small smile. We watched as Mike taught Emma military hand signals, Duke responding to her commands with patient precision. Already they moved like a unit, like family. "Mom really planned all this?" Sarah asked. "Every detail. Even renovated the guest house specifically for Mike." "That's either brilliant or terrifying." "Both. Definitely both." Duke broke away from the training session, trotting over to check on us. He did his usual scan, nose to my chest, quick sniff of Sarah's stress levels, then sat between us, satisfied that his pack was stable for the moment. "You know what the really annoying part is?" Sarah said, her hand finding Duke's head. "She was right, as usual." "About what?" "All of it. You needed Duke. Duke needed Mike. Emma needed her father. I needed—" She trailed off. "What do you need, sweetheart?" Sarah was quiet for a long moment, watching her daughter. When she spoke, her voice was barely above a whisper. "To stop being so afraid. To stop waiting for everyone to leave. Mike's not going anywhere. Neither am I. You almost did." "But I didn't. Duke wouldn't let me." I put my arm around her shoulders, felt her lean into me like she used to when she was small. "Your mother sent us a guardian angel with 4 legs and a nose for trouble. A guardian angel who sheds and drools. The best kind. Mike noticed us watching and said something to Emma. She waved enthusiastically. "Grandpa, Mom, watch this." She gave Duke a series of hand signals and he responded perfectly. Sit, down, stay, search. When he completed the sequence, she threw her arms around his neck and he accepted her hug with patient dignity. "She's a natural," Mike called. "Must run in the family." Sarah tensed beside me. This was it. The moment she either accepted this new reality or rejected it. I held my breath, feeling my newly repaired heart skip slightly. Then Duke made the decision for her. He trotted back to Emma, grabbed a tennis ball and brought it directly to Sarah, dropped it at her feet and sat, tail wagging, eyes bright with invitation. "Seriously?" Sarah said to the dog. "You're going to fix this with Fetch?" Duke barked once. Affirmative. Sarah picked up the ball, hefted it, then threw it across the yard. Duke exploded into motion, all power and purpose. Emma cheered. Mike smiled. And for just a moment we looked like what Helen had envisioned, a family, complicated, patched together, held by threads of shared loss and unexpected grace, but family nonetheless. "Okay," Sarah said quietly, watching Duke race back with the ball. "Okay, Mom. You win. We'll try." Duke dropped the ball at her feet again, ready for another throw, ready for whatever came next. Just like the rest of us, I realized. Ready, finally, to stop grieving what we'd lost and start building with what we'd found. After reading Helen's journal, I understood why she'd chosen Duke for us. Not just for me, but for all of us. Sometimes the deepest wounds need the gentlest healing, and there's nothing gentler than a dog's persistence in loving broken people back to wholeness. That night I sat on the porch watching the stars appear over the desert, Duke beside me, his warm weight against my leg like an anchor. The monsoon season had passed, leaving the air crisp and clear, scented with creosote and sage. Inside I could hear Mike washing dishes while Emma read to him from her homework. Sarah was still here, curled in Helen's chair with a cup of tea, not ready to leave this fragile new normal we were building. "You know what I've learned?" I said to Duke, who tilted his head at my voice. "Your handler didn't just survive that IED. He was reborn from it, just like you were reborn when you found him again. Just like I'm being reborn now, one heartbeat at a time." Duke's tail thumped against the wooden boards, and I took that as agreement. The back door opened and Sarah stepped out, wrapping Helen's old cardigan around herself. She sat beside me, the three of us forming a quiet line, watching the world settle into evening. "Emma wants to know if Mike can come to her school's Veterans Day assembly," she said. "She wants to tell everyone about Duke." "What did you say?" "That we'd have to ask you both." She paused, then added, "She also wants to know if she can call him Dad." The word hung in the air between us, heavy with 9 years of absence and possibility. Through the window we could see Mike helping Emma with math, his patience endless as she worked through problems. Duke watched them too, ever vigilant, ever protective of his pack. "What do you want?" I asked Sarah. "I want to stop being scared," she said. "I want Emma to have what I had. A father who shows up, who stays, who teaches her to be brave." Her voice caught. "I want to forgive myself for lying to everyone, including myself." "There's nothing to forgive. You did what you thought was right with the information you had." "Did I? Or did I just take the easier path?" She pulled the cardigan tighter. "Mom would have fought to find the truth. You would have, but I just accepted it, moved on. Built a life on a lie." Duke shifted, placing his head on Sarah's knee, and she absently stroked his ears. The simple gesture broke something loose in her, and suddenly she was crying. Not the controlled tears of a professional used to tragedy, but the messy, healing sobs of someone finally letting go. "I missed him," she whispered. "God, I missed him so much, and I couldn't even admit it because he was supposed to be dead." How do you mourn someone properly when there's no grave to visit, no closure, just nothing? I thought of my own years of almost mourning, watching Helen fade, preparing for loss while she was still alive. You do exactly what you did. You survive. You raise your daughter. You work. You breathe. And then one day, if you're very lucky, life gives you a second chance. Is that what this is? "Look at them," I said, nodding toward the window. Mike was demonstrating something with pencils, probably explaining angles or fractions using military precision. Emma was giggling. "Does that look like anything but a second chance?" Duke suddenly stood, alert, but not alarmed. Seconds later, Tom Martinez appeared around the corner of the house. "Sorry to interrupt," he said, "but Robert, there's someone here to see you. Says he's from the VA." My chest tightened. Old habits of expecting bad news from official visits. But Duke was calm, tail wagging slightly, so I relaxed. The man who followed Tom was young, maybe 30, in civilian clothes but carrying himself with military bearing. "Mr. Hayes, I'm Captain David Chen, Army Veterinary Corps. I'm here about MWD Duke." Duke's ears perked at his official designation. Mike must have heard because he appeared in the doorway, Emma peering around him curiously. "What about Duke?" Mike's voice carried the protective edge I recognized from my own reactions to threats against those we love. Captain Chen smiled. "Nothing bad, Sergeant Thompson. Actually, quite the opposite. We've been tracking Duke since his irregular discharge from service. When his chip showed up active at this address, we investigated, found out about the miscommunication regarding both your status and his." "Miscommunication," Mike said flatly. "That's what we're calling it?" "I'm not here to make excuses for administrative failures," Chen said. "I'm here to make it right. Duke served with distinction. 3 combat deployments, 47 confirmed saves, wounded in action. He deserves recognition." He pulled out a folder, extracted papers. "We'd like to formally retire military working dog Duke with full honors. There's also the matter of his benefits, medical care through the VA, which I understand Mr. Hayes has been covering personally." "I don't need repayment," I started, but Chen held up a hand. "It's not repayment, sir. It's what he earned. Duke is a veteran, same as you, same as Sergeant Thompson. His medical care should have been covered from day one." Emma had crept closer, drawn by the serious adult conversation. "Duke's a veteran? Like Grandpa and Mike?" "Exactly like them," Chen said, smiling at her. "He's a hero who served his country." "I knew it," Emma breathed. "I knew he was special." Chen continued. "There's also a ceremony, if you're interested. Formal retirement, medals presentation. Duke has earned a Purple Heart equivalent, among others." I looked at Mike, saw the emotion working across his scarred face. This was recognition not just for Duke, but for their partnership, their sacrifice, their survival against odds that should have killed them both. "We'll think about it," Mike managed. After Chen left, we sat in the living room, all of us, even Tom, who'd claimed neighbor privileges and stayed. Duke lay in the center of our circle, somehow touching each of us, head on Mike's foot, back against my leg, tail touching Sarah's shoe, Emma's hand buried in his fur. "A Purple Heart," Tom said. "That's something." "He earned it," Mike said quietly. "That day, the IED, Duke saw it first, alerted, gave us seconds to react, not enough to avoid it entirely, but enough that some of us survived. He took shrapnel pulling me to cover after, never left my side until they sedated him. And then they told you both the other was dead, Sarah said, anger threading through her voice. How does that even happen? Chaos, bureaucracy, different units processing different casualties? Mike shrugged. Doesn't matter now. We found each other. Mom found you, Emma corrected. Grandma Helen made sure. We all looked at each other, the truth of it settling over us like a benediction. Helen had orchestrated this reunion from her deathbed, had seen the broken pieces and figured out how they fit together. You know what? I said, surprising myself. Let's do the ceremony. All of it. Duke deserves recognition. We all deserve to see something done right for once. Can I tell my class? Emma asked. About Duke being a hero? You can tell everyone, Mike said, his voice thick. Tell them about the best dog who ever served. Tell them about loyalty that survives everything, even death. Duke's tail thumped against the floor, and I swear he understood every word. But then, he'd always understood more than we gave him credit for. He'd understood that Mike was alive when everyone said otherwise. He'd understood that my heart was failing before any machine detected it. He'd understood that healing happens not in isolation, but in connection. That broken things can be whole again if you just hold them together long enough. That night, after everyone had gone to their respective homes, Mike to the guest house, Sarah and Emma to their apartment with promises to return tomorrow, I sat with Helen's journal one more time. On the last page, in handwriting so shaky it was barely legible, she'd written, "Love multiplies, always, even through loss, especially through loss. Trust the dog, Robert. He knows the way home." Duke padded over, did his usual medical check, then curled beside my chair. His breathing deepened into sleep, secure in the knowledge that his pack was safe, was whole, was home. Tomorrow would bring arrangements for ceremonies, difficult conversations about the future, the ongoing complexity of blended families and second chances. But tonight, in this moment, we were exactly where Helen had hoped we'd be. Together, healing, held by bonds stronger than blood or law or time. The desert wind whispered through the windows, carrying the scent of rain from distant mountains. My repaired heart beat steadily in my chest. Duke dreamed at my feet, his paws twitching as he ran through phantom fields, and somewhere, I was certain, Helen was smiling, watching her complicated, perfect plan unfold exactly as she'd intended. The dog had saved us all just as she'd known he would. Love had multiplied just as she'd promised it would. We were home,